Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Do you dread hearing the question, what's for dinner? Whether you spend your days keeping up with toddlers, running kids to after-school activities, or juggling a career and family, getting dinner on the table can be a struggle for us all. I'm Mariefiebach, a business owner, wife, and mom of 4. I'm on a mission to build stronger families one dinner at a time, and I'm here with tips, tricks, and inspiration you need to feed your family tonight. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 146. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and today we're going to talk about how to pick a recipe that your family will actually try. This is a big challenge for a lot of us. I've said before that weeknight dinner is more about time management than it is about the recipes. But for a lot of us, we need recipes too, and we're kind of tired of serving the same things over and over again. But when you start looking through recipes, it is so easy to get overwhelmed. And it's also really easy to get discouraged, thinking that your family is never going to eat anything and they are so picky and you are tired of this. Then you just go back to your same old recipes over and over again. If you feel like that, let me know. I'd love to hear about that in the Facebook group because I feel like that's how I feel sometimes. And if I'm feeling that way, I bet some of you are feeling that way too. So today I'm going to help you be better at picking recipes that your family will be more likely to try. There are no guarantees. I cannot promise you that every recipe you try is going to work, but I'm going to give you 4 key tips to help you pick recipes that are more likely to work for your family. Way back in episode 115, I introduced the concept of base ingredients, where you want to look at what are the main ingredients and what are the main flavors in the foods that you are cooking. And that when you try to expand your family's palate, you don't want to change both of them at the same time. So you don't want to go from a spaghetti with a red meat sauce to a chickpea curry. That's too much of a leap for your family, where you can kind of maybe you go from a spaghetti with meat sauce to a spaghetti with lentils or a spaghetti with chickpeas. You're not changing the flavors and kind of the main ingredients at the same time. Today, I'm kind of going to take that concept just a little bit deeper and a little bit further, and we're going to go through the 4 tips to pick a recipe that your family will be more likely to try. And the first step is to identify the foods that your family already likes. What are the things that you are already making that they like to eat? And then this one's really good. I learned this tip from my friend at Friendly Pantry, where what are the foods that your family orders in restaurants? I live in Wichita, Kansas, and in Wichita there is a large Lebanese community. There are lots of Lebanese restaurants, and years ago, my husband and I went to a community dinner that was at the Lebanese Orthodox Church that was just a few blocks from our home. And when we would go out to eat, we were often eating at some of these amazing Lebanese restaurants. And my husband figured out that he really liked the taste of Lebanese food. And he asked me, can you learn how to make some of this food? And I did. I learned how to make some of the classic Lebanese food from friends and from reading articles in our local newspaper and searching out recipes. And my family has grown to love stuffed grape leaves and hummus and tabbouleh and kibbeh and yakni and rus, which are all of these Lebanese specialties, because those were the foods that my family liked to eat in restaurants. So think about foods that your family already likes, and think about the foods that they are already eating in restaurants to identify the types of foods that your family likes to eat. Step 2 is to identify the common threads in the meals that you already make that they like. What are the flavors that are on repeat in your home? Are there ethnic foods? Like we found out that my family liked the taste of Lebanese food. Are there things like soy sauce or garlic or cumin or oregano? all of those 4 flavors cross over different types of cuisines. And if you can start identifying some of the flavors that your family likes, it's going to be easier. Other common threads in meals that you make. Does your family like things with sauces? Do they like spaghetti? Do they like mashed potatoes and gravy? Do they like beef stroganoff? Those are all foods that have some type of a sauce. Or are they a family that prefers foods that are drier? Think grilled meats and grilled vegetables. Think things that are roasted in the oven that do not have sauces. Is there a common carb that if food is presented with that particular carb, your family will eat it regardless of the flavors? Maybe your family loves pasta and they don't care if it's with spaghetti. They don't care if it's with shrimp with a wine sauce, or maybe it's a gnocchi on a sheet pan with some sausage and veggies. If there is some kind of pasta, your family's going to at least try it. Or maybe your family isn't a pasta family, but they like rice. I have a friend whose family serves rice with dinner every night because her husband is Japanese and he grew up having rice every night. If rice is the common carb, then maybe you start adding different flavors of things with the rice. How comfortable is your family with plant-based meals? Are you the type of family where dinner isn't dinner if there isn't meat on the table? As a parent, you have got to do some detective work. Start observing your family's habits. It may take a little bit of time, but if you start paying attention, you're going to find the common threads in the foods that your family prefers. It's kind of funny because I have been married 21 years. And when my husband and I go to a restaurant, I can scan the menu and within a minute, I know that my husband's going to pick one of 2 dishes on the menu. Without fail, I am usually right. But the reason is because I know what he loves. I know what he absolutely dislikes. I know that if he would rather have a hamburger or a pasta or a big salad, and that changes from day to day, but I know what kind of seasons he's more likely to pick those types of foods. I know there are ingredients that if that is listed in the description of a dish, it's an absolute no-go. And I know that there are ingredients where he's like, maybe I can give that a try, depending upon what the other things that those ingredients are paired with. Sometimes it's even comical because my husband will look at me and he goes, what am I going to like on this menu? And I will tell him the 1 or 2 things that I know that he's going to like. And I'm usually right because I know his taste so well. So this doesn't have to be a big, complicated thing. Deep in your brain, you know what your family likes too. Try not to get too idealistic with yourself and do not beat yourself down if your family does not prefer things that you really, really want them to like. This is about being honest with yourself and honest about the reality of your family. Step number 3. Is look for recipes that match as many of those common threads that you have discovered in your family as possible. Have you ever flipped through a magazine and you're looking at the food section? I always flip to the food section first, by the way, because that is my favorite part of just about any magazine. But you're flipping through a magazine and you're thinking, whose family is going to eat this stuff? Do you ever look at that and you think, my family would not touch that with a 10-foot pole? You know what? That's really good information to know because you know that it isn't common enough to the food that your family already eats. If you wish your family would eat some of this food, you are not alone. 90% of the recipes out there are not going to be for you, and I'm here with these steps to help you find the ones that will work. I want to tell you a story about my dear friend, Betsy. Betsy Wallace and her sister, Kate Schultz, have this really fun podcast, The Dinner Sisters. If you don't subscribe, it's a great podcast, so check it out. They make 3 recipes and they make them in their 2 different homes. Kate is single and is a total foodie and is about as venturous as you're going to get as far as food comes. And she's the one who picks the recipes. Betsy is feeding her family of 5, including 3 children, who are far more adventurous than my children, I might say, but our children nonetheless. Most of the time, Betsy makes these recipes and she serves them to her family, but every once in a while, her sister Kate will pick a recipe and Betsy's like, I'm making that one for lunch because I don't want to have the battle at the table that my kids think it looks icky or it smells icky or it has ingredients that they don't like. So even someone who has very adventurous kids, because Betsy's kids' palates are far more developed than my kids' palates, but even Betsy knows that not every recipe is to feed her family, and sometimes she makes them just for herself for lunch. It's okay for you to have a few recipes that are just for you at lunch or on a Saturday afternoon, or make a recipe for you and your husband and feed the kids chicken nuggets. If you want to do that, I don't want this search for the perfect family recipe to get you frustrated and feeling like you can never try things that your kids aren't going to eat, because that is not true. But I also want you to be really honest with yourself about the types of foods that you really believe that your kids are willing to try and the types of foods that are going to be a no-go from the start. When you are looking at recipes, you want to find foods and flavors that are mostly familiar. If you have all the ingredients in your house to make a particular recipe, that's usually a good sign that you're on the right track. So when you're looking at recipes, start thinking about, do I keep these ingredients on hand? Is this something that I have bought in the past that my family has eaten? Or has my family rejected that if I've tried it in the past? And that's going to get you closer to picking a good recipe. The final step, step number 4, is to examine what is different in this recipe from recipes that you already make. And this is a really big key, is how is this recipe different? Are the ingredients the same, but the cooking method is different? And one example of that I can think of is fajitas. You can have fajitas that are grilled. You can have fajitas that are cooked on the stove. You can have fajitas that are cooked in a sheet pan in the oven. And you can have fajitas that are cooked in a slow cooker or an Instant Pot. They all kind of have the same ingredients of some type of a meat and some peppers and onions and veggies. And they're all kind of in the same realm, but they're cooked differently. When you're looking at a recipe, if all the ingredients are the same, but the cooking method is a little different, might be a recipe worth trying in your home. Does the recipe use the same base ingredients, but with different spices? An example of that is maybe it's a grilled chicken that is marinated in an Asian marinade that has some soy sauce and a little bit of miso and maybe some hot peppers, versus a grilled chicken that is marinated in lemon and oregano and olive oil. They're both grilled chicken. They kind of have the same base ingredients, but the flavors are very different. If you know that your family kind of likes the Asian flavors and they kind of like the lemon oregano flavors, both of those recipes could work. They're similar and then they're different. Does the recipe use familiar ingredients in a new way? And a good example of that is barbecue chicken pizza. Your family's probably familiar with pizza. They likely are also familiar with barbecue chicken. If your family likes barbecue chicken and your family likes pizza, maybe a barbecue chicken pizza is a good way to try familiar ingredients in a new way. When you are choosing a new recipe, you want to keep as many of the elements as familiar as possible, and that is going to help your family to be more likely to try it. And you're going to say, well, then we're just still having the same thing over and over again. And I'm going to say, maybe. But this is how you can slowly and gradually expand your family's palates in small little steps. And I'm going to close today with a little story about how in 2017, when I started Feed Your Family Tonight, I was giving talks to a lot of moms groups and PTOs. And part of my talk was that what my family is going to eat is probably not the same as what your family is going to eat. And I would ask the audience how many of their families would eat chicken enchiladas. And usually about 80% of the hands would go up. I said, my family would not touch chicken enchiladas with a 10-foot pole. And in 2017, they would not touch chicken enchiladas. Fast forward to 2021, and chicken enchiladas are a family favorite. And let me tell you how I got from not touching chicken enchiladas to chicken enchiladas being a family favorite. It started with changing how I made tacos some of the time. Before 2017, we always had a standard beef taco. I had a homemade taco mix that I would make, and I would cook beef. I usually cut it half beef, half turkey, and we would just have ground beef and ground turkey tacos, standard American tacos. And then I got the idea that I would try making chicken tacos. And so when I got my first electric pressure cooker, I made chicken tacos in the pressure cooker where I used the same taco spices, and I switched it from beef and ground turkey to chicken thighs. And my family loved the chicken tacos. Now you can see here, I changed the protein, but I kept the flavors exactly the same. So we moved from beef tacos to chicken tacos. And the chicken tacos, because they released some of their chicken juices when they were cooking, they were a little bit wetter than the really, really dry beef. So the texture started to change. Then my family would never eat casseroles before. Not a fan of casseroles, but they did like tater tots. And so a couple years ago, I thought I'm going to try and make a tater tot casserole because it has beef that they like. I made it with a really simple gravy that was more like a beef gravy rather than like a cream of something soup because my family's not a fan of cream of something soups. So I used the familiar ingredient of gravy, the familiar ingredient of beef, and I topped it with tater tots. And guess what? My family ate a casserole. So now I've moved them into eating casseroles. Chicken enchiladas are basically a chicken Mexican casserole, right? You bake it in a casserole dish. It's basically a casserole. So then we moved to chicken enchiladas, where it had a sauce that was very similar in flavor to the chicken tacos. And I had the tortillas, which were familiar. They were more familiar with the concept of a casserole, and that became a family favorite food. So slowly over time, in small little incremental steps, you can expand your family's palate by choosing recipes that are more familiar than not. You want to pick ingredients and flavors and cooking methods that are familiar and make small little changes, and eventually you will expand your family's palate. I really hope that this episode has helped you start observing what your family already likes so that you can flip through the magazine and pick out the one of the 12 recipes that might work in your family because you followed those 4 steps of identifying foods that your family already likes, finding the common threads in the meals that they like, looking for recipes that match as many of those common threads as possible, and then choosing a recipe that has something different from what you already make, but also something very familiar. I would love to hear about how you all pick recipes. Join me in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group. And if you're not following me on Instagram, go over and follow me at Feed Your Family Tonight. I would love to connect with you there. There's a little bit more behind the scenes that happens on Instagram, and I love to connect with listeners on Instagram. For now, friends, I hope you are doing well. Take care.